Hello, and welcome to the JCC of Metro Detroit's 69th Annual Detroit Jewish Book Fair. I'm Sandy Matz, and I'm a member of the Book Fair Executive Committee. It is my pleasure to welcome you on this Thursday afternoon to hear Jason Rosenthal, author of My Wife Said You May Want to Marry Me, presented in partnership with the 2020 Ann Arbor Jewish Book Festival. The goal of the Detroit Jewish Book Fair is to bring the best new Jewish books and authors from around the world to Metro Detroit. This year, the rooms we're all sitting in may be different, but that purpose remains. The book fair runs through December 9th, and we have an exceptional lineup of events planned. To see our full event schedule, learn about ways to support book fair, watch events you may have missed, and find our online store where you can find My Wife Said You May Want to Marry Me and plenty of other hand-selected books and gifts, visit our website at culturalarts.jccdet.org/bookfair. This year, in order to provide as much programming to the community as possible, we've made all of our events free of charge. So if you enjoyed this event and other book fair events, please consider becoming a patron or donating to book fair. You can do this at our website, culturalarts.jccdet.org/bookfair. We rely on community support to make this annual event possible. So thank you in advance for becoming part of the family. The book fair team would like to thank the Jewish Hospice and Chaplaincy Network for co-sponsoring this event. We have a really special program for you today, and we want you to be a part of it. You can ask questions and offer comments in the YouTube comments section below or by texting the number in the corner of your screen. Our speakers have a great discussion prepared, and they will take as many of your questions as they can. While you're here at your YouTube channel, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the reminder bell. That way, you'll never miss any of our exciting events. The focus of today's event is the book, My Wife Said You May Want to Marry Me. We have with us the author of the book, Jason Rosenthal, as well as Rabbi Joseph Krakoff, who will moderate the discussion. In 2017, an op-ed piece written by Amy Krauss Rosenthal appeared in the New York Times 10 days before she died of ovarian cancer. You May Want to Marry My Husband was a creative play on a personal ad and quickly went viral. In his book, her husband Jason describes what came next. Jason Rosenthal is a lawyer and the executive director of a nonprofit organization created in his wife's name, the Amy Krauss Rosenthal Foundation, which funds literacy programs and ovarian cancer research. Rabbi Joseph Krakoff is currently the senior director of the Jewish Hospice and Chaplaincy Network here in Michigan, following a 16-year career as a congregational rabbi. He is co-author of the book, Never Long Enough, Finding Comfort and Hope Amidst Grief and Loss. Please join me in welcoming Jason Rosenthal and Rabbi Joseph Krakoff.
Thanks, Sandy. Well,
Hi,
Jason,
good afternoon. Thank you, Sandy.
Jason, it's an honor to be able to share this next hour with you. Your book was really very special and meaningful and thought-provoking. And so I'm looking forward to our conversation. I'm also looking forward to anybody that wants to jump in and ask questions or make comments. Please use the comment opportunity to do that. So I think a good place for us to begin, Jason, would be go back to your childhood. You described at the very beginning of your book, you're a Chicago guy, born and raised. Tell us about what it was like to grow up in your family, what it was like to grow up in Chicago, because you also say that family has always been the center of who you are as a person.
It sure has, no question about it. So going back to my own childhood, I was raised for a long time by a single mom. My mother's just a terrific, strong, beautiful, wonderful human being. She is a social worker and is still well into her 80s, working almost full time. It's remarkable.
Wow.
And she raised me and my sister Michelle here in Chicago. And so my parents were divorced when I was 2 years old, and she remarried when I was about 9 or 10 to my stepfather, who she was married to up until he just passed a couple of weeks ago. And yeah, I was very lucky. I just want to preface this conversation with that. I was enveloped with love and support for my entire childhood, and my mom also gave me a tremendous amount of freedom to get into a little bit of trouble, but not too much trouble, and to be the man that I am today.
Beautiful. Let me ask you this: how was the fact that your parents were divorced? How did that have an effect, just sort of globally, on your approach to marriage and sort of what you thought about marriage and the person that you would hope to marry down the road?
You would think that that would have a huge impact on what happened in my own life, but the reality is, I did not expect to get married as young as I did, and we can talk about that in a minute. But I found this amazing human being that I wanted to spend my life with, and I didn't have the perfect modeling for what it was like to be in a healthy relationship. So a lot of it was intuition and love and other things, that we can discuss.
Absolutely. Well, I certainly want to jump in and talk about Amy. And one of the things I think that touched me so deeply through this book, and there were many pieces that touched me deeply, but what a beautiful way to keep Amy's spirit and her legacy alive through your words and through your description of your relationship. So tell us how you met Amy and when you knew that this was the woman that you wanted to be with, that you wanted to marry.
Yeah, so I talk a lot about my own relationship in the book, and one of the reasons is that I'm sure we'll get to the Amy's essay, but I wanted to share with the world a little bit about what those two people were really like. And so the story is to me, and I hope to everyone, an interesting story. I was studying for the Illinois bar exam to become a lawyer, and a gentleman that we affectionately called, both of us affectionately called Uncle John, who dated my mom in the 70s when I was a little kid, and who coincidentally was also Amy's dad, Paul's best childhood friend, called me and he said, "There's this wonderful woman moving back from a big advertising job in San Francisco to Chicago, and I think you should give her a call." And for some reason, I took down her number, spelling her name wrong, and I included an image of that in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And I called her. And I said, "Look, I'm studying for the bar, but let's go out." And so it was my first and only blind date. And Amy famously says at the end of that meal that she knew she wanted to marry me, but I would say about a year later, I got on board and felt the same way for sure.
One of the things that you say in the book is that you both wanted each other to be happy and to succeed and to make an impact and to find inspiration. Talk a little bit about that, because that's, I think, so beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about it because, to my surprise, the first third of the book really does talk about love and relationships and family. And, to my surprise, a lot of people have resonated deeply with those relationship issues. But I think there's three entities that were successful in our relationship. One was Jason, one was Amy, and then, of course, the other one was the two of us together. And I say that because I think it was really important that she was there so much for me and I was there so much for her to succeed and thrive in life and in business and in family and in your social relationships. But we always remembered how important it was to come back to who we were when we met, and that falling in love and maintaining that freshness.
In Jewish tradition, there's a concept of when two people find each other, you're supposed to find your ezer kenegdo, which means you're supposed to find the person that you love and that reflects your values, but you're also supposed to find the person that challenges you, that doesn't always say yes. Would you say that in that description of sort of finding, your other half or your better half, plus someone who pushes you to be your best, you saw that in Amy?
Oh yeah. Oh, I think that's beautiful. I actually have never heard that, and I think that's lovely. Yeah, I think that's really true. Um, and there's also a sense of just encouraging each other because on a random Wednesday, if you come back from work and there was something that you could only tell your spouse to be happy about, to really encourage each other and give each other that freedom to to be that person that you could be, but you're better because of the other person in the relationship.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's talk about your kids. We'll come back to Amy because obviously we want to spend a lot of time there. But I love that you incorporated each of your children, and I think in a meaningful way, into the book. So tell us a little bit about your children.
Sure. I love talking about my children. It's one of my great, joys is being a father to these three amazing human beings. And we had three kids in diapers for basically 6 years. They're all basically 2 years apart. And we had a ton of fun, led by, I think, I give myself some credit, but led by Amy's creativity and her whimsy and just her zest for life infused itself into our family. So I have three children. My youngest is 23, and then 25 and 27. Actually, he just turned 26. And so they are now, trying to find their way as young adults in the world, and they're doing great.
It's great. Good to hear. Good to hear. One of the things you say early on is that the way to teach your kids the value of making a difference was through social service. And so you
Right.
made this a part of your travel. Talk a little bit about that, because I think that's so unique and so special.
Yeah, thanks. I will add also that it was our connection to Judaism also that um, made us able to engage in social service projects throughout the course of the kids' lives. And that was very, very special. But yeah, I mean, it was really important to us. We recognized our privilege. We could go on vacation and we sometimes went on some really unique trips. But almost every single time we spent a day or a week or longer engaging in a social service project with the kids. And so there was one trip where I was on trial. I couldn't go. So Amy took the kids to Brazil. They worked in an orphanage and they still talk about it to this day. We went to Guatemala and intentionally through a social service agency worked to build stoves because the indigenous people there were so impoverished that they were actually cooking inside these tents that they would live in. So we built stoves and allowed the exhausts to go out of this hut that they were living in. And I could go on and on, but yeah, that was really, really important to us to teach those values to our kids.
It's wonderful. That's wonderful. So your kids are older. You have this list of empty nest plans, things that you're going to do, the two of you together, and then the tumor.
That's correct. Irony of all ironies. I mean, what happened was our youngest daughter, Paris, was literally just had gone off to college. And Amy was out of town on a business trip, and she called me and said, something, I'm not feeling so great in my stomach. And, you have to understand, I write about this too, this is from a woman who very, very rarely complained about anything physical at all. And so I said, well, maybe it's an appendicitis or something. And she said her doctor had advised her that I should pick her up and take her directly to the emergency room. And that's what I did. And of course, like you said, the very unexpected, blind side happened. And that was that we discovered that Amy had a malignant tumor that needed further investigation and turned out to be ovarian cancer.
So when you got the diagnosis and you had to digest it and she had to digest it and the family had to digest it, how do you then go about telling other people? How do you share that news? How do you even make that happen?
Yeah, I mean, the most devastating part of that story for anyone who gets this news, who is a parent, is having to tell your children the news. And they were each remember it very well. I remember when I was writing the book, I wanted to hear from them what specifically they remembered about us giving them that information. And really what it was is they were all, dispersed all over the country doing their own thing. And so we set up a conference call, and didn't we didn't hide any information. Yet at the same time, I remember personally wanting to, make them confident that, we're going to do everything we can for mom, and we'll see what happens. And it was a devastating moment, and so difficult to do. But they were wonderful. They really were. From the very first moment they found out their mom was sick, they were just right there for her and for us.
That's good to hear. I know you say in the book that we became a cancer family forever. And the question that I have about that is, how do you help people understand that you are not your illness? That Amy was the same Amy. Her person was the same. Obviously the illness changes things, but she is not cancer. She is Amy. How do you help people understand that and react to that and treat her that way? Right.
It's hard. And there are certain people, for me, I saw her every day. And so the slow decline, physically, I'm talking about, was a little less evident, although of course at some point it becomes so super clear and shocking. But there are those who don't see, someone who's this sick for a week even or two, and it's really, really difficult to observe. But I think the answer to your question is, and this is what I try to do, is I try to infuse our life with as much normalcy as possible, and to really treat Amy as I always had, and that was to shower her with love and make her comfortable. So for example, we went through a Valentine's Day, and I did what I normally do. I wrote her some beautiful cards and I posted them up around the house. But yeah, I think it's an effort to try to be as normal as you can along the way, and not make them feel, like you said, like a patient.
Right. I know illness is scary for everyone, scary for the individual that's going through it, scary for loved ones and friends. And I know that people often, even though they have the right intention, they often disappear during illness because they don't know what to say. They don't know what to do. People often say that you really find out who your real friends are when an illness happens, because those are the ones that somehow figure it out. What kind of advice or guidelines, and again, I recognize every situation is different and unique, but what can people do when they hear that a friend or a loved one is ill? What would be the best thing to do, and what would be the best thing not to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would borrow from something I think that you wrote or you said that I discovered, and that is, just to be there, and to be sincere and to be kind, and those. So when people ask me that specific question, I give an answer that's so obvious that it's kind of silly, but it's really, really basic and true, and that is, one way that you can be there for someone who's grieving is to say, because like you said, people don't know what to say or do, is to say, you know what, I just want you to know that I'm here and I'm thinking about you, and I care. And I don't really know what to say because this is very confusing, but I am here for you. And it goes just such a long way, because the opposite, which is to say nothing, is something that I can very strongly encourage people not to do. I say a couple anecdotes in the book that I hope will be, slightly humorous, that actually happened to me. But, the other thing is, find a way, your own way. It doesn't have to be intrusive in the family's life, but to just be there, reach out. So for example, I have a friend who we share an interest in music with, all of us did, two couples. And so he would send me music lyrics, just text them to me every once in a while. And it was just such a beautiful, simple gesture, but it really made me smile when I got them, and, and Amy too. And we knew that they were there and they cared.
I was really struck actually by that as you wrote about it in the book. I thought that was so smart, and just, it was a little thing that went so far.
Right? Yeah.
People do. I think they're well-meaning mostly, and I think they want to do the right thing. And I think both with illness and with grief, people want to find the magical words that are going to bring healing. And there are no magical words. I mean, you say it so well that your presence, how, and in whatever way that is. One of the things you also said in the book, which I thought was like, yes. I literally wrote yes in my book as I was reading it. When you said, you should say something like, I'm sorry, I'm thinking about you, but not let's get together, because that puts the onus on you then to make the plans, not on them. And I think that, then they feel like they did the right thing because they said, let's get together, but it's so vague, it's so ambiguous, and it puts the onus on you. Oh, okay, now I need to find the time. Like you said, like say 6 o'clock, I'll meet you here. And if you can't do it, you'll say, sorry, can't do it, but thank you.
No, it's really true, and that comes from personal experience. It may be intuitive, but it comes from personal experience. I had several people who saw me shortly after Amy died and say, "Hey, let's go grab a beer sometime." I'm like, "Oh, great, yeah, I'm really in the mood to do that. A, and B, I'm going to reach out to you. I don't think that's really a meaningful gesture.
Right.
Well intentioned. Don't get me wrong. And as you and I discuss this, and more people, find some tools that they can use to speak to someone who's grieving, the better. But I encourage people to make a specific plan. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. And I also talk about this line of greeting cards that I discovered at a conference I was at, which is a wonderful line of greeting cards by a woman named Emily McDowell. You can Google it and find her website. But she writes all of these cards that Hallmark would never touch. That approach people in a deep way, but in a humorous way, to connect with them as they're going through grief.
Yeah, no, well said. So talk about, I'm particularly interested as a senior director of Jewish Hospice and Chaplaincy here in the Metro Detroit area. Talk about the home hospice experience, having Amy at home in a familiar surrounding, to be able to be there with her. You talk about it in the book, but if you could share a little bit with us about the home hospice experience.
Yeah, we had the devastating news that Amy had to go into home hospice, and that there was no further treatment that the doctors could do. And so we had a decision to do hospice at home or in the hospital. And for us, it was never an issue. We knew that we wanted Amy to be at home, and I recognize. I just want to say this up front, that's not always the option for people, and so I'm not poo-pooing the hospice, the hospice structure and the hospital structure. It's very, it's beautiful work that people do. But for us, being at home was where I knew that we wanted Amy to be. I could be there with her. The kids could be there with her. And so, again, there's no real guidebook, but what I decided to do is to really make her as comfortable as we possibly could, and to infuse the house with beauty. And so I talk a little bit about some of the things that I did. For example, I peppered the house with candles. For some reason, those spoke to me so far as I actually learned how to make them, and I put them all over the house. We had music, played in the house. The hospice experience helped us through the hospice company helped us with a music therapist, but who really just came and was so beautiful. She asked us what kind of music Amy wanted, and so she came once a week, and we'd sit and just listen, and it was a beautiful moment. And I organized groups of visitors, and Amy was so brave to accept them, but why not? It was an opportunity to say goodbye. And so we had a host of people, her family, our friends, and groups like that would come in and spend some really, really beautiful and meaningful time with us and with Amy.
I love that you did that. I love that Amy was open to that. I mean, in Jewish tradition, we are supposed to treat someone who is alive, even at the end of life, as if they're fully alive. And for every minute that they have breath inside of them, we're supposed to have hope, but not false hope, not give them false hope, but still treat them as if we treat them if they weren't dying. And I love what you did and how you created such a beautiful space in your home with your family and just made her so comfortable. I just think that's so special and so meaningful.
Thank you.
So I want to encourage comments. I mean, I have tons of questions, so I could keep going, but I also want people that are watching to feel empowered to jump in with comments, and I'm happy to share them. But until we get any, like I said, I've got lots. I want to get to the essay. I want to get to the essay, the New York Times essay of March 3rd, 2017. You may want to marry my husband. You saw this before it was published.
Well, it's probably the number one question I get from everybody who's interviewed me or experiences like this. And the reality is this: we were in home hospice, and how about this for Amy? She's heavily medicated and literally days before dying. And she's got one final project that she wants to do. And I knew that. I knew that. And I saw her tinkering away at her keyboard and kind of, falling asleep because of the heavy medication she was on, and then, getting back up and doing it some more. But I didn't know what that was at the time. And it was not only until she was completely done with it and said, "Hey, do you want to read this?" that I read it.
Wow.
But she had a goal to get it into the Modern Love column in the New York Times. That was something that she was attracted to. To be frank with you, I really didn't pay much attention to that in my Sunday paper.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I read it, and I said, first comment was, "This is so Amy. It's such beautiful, beautiful prose. The writing was so incredible."
Yeah.
And then it was also her ability to combine humor into that heavy, heavy topic was just so typical Amy. And it was a beautiful piece of writing. And I of course, encouraged her to publish it, but I will say, even living with a writer who was as successful as Amy, you never know. One never knows. There were a lot of rejections over the course of her writing life, even as a successful author. So I had no idea, A, whether it would be published, and of course, B, the viral, crazy nature of how many people read it.
So talk about your reaction to when you actually digested it, and the reaction of people that reached out, recognizing that this was published 10 days before she died.
Right. Well, immediately, the response was overwhelming. I think that it came out online on a Friday and in the paper on a Sunday. And I can recall one experience I had going out to get a Starbucks, a couple days later, and there was the Chicago Tribune, and I picked it up, and she was on the front page of the newspaper, and so I said to the barista, "This is my wife." He's like, "Oh, great," he didn't really care that much, but so that was the beginning of it, and really, truly, the response was absolutely incredible. Amy was unfortunately unable to really process the outpouring of love that she and all of us got as a result of her writing. Because, as you said, she died 10 days later. But I began to get, thousands and thousands of correspondence, some emails directly to the New York Times, and many, many other correspondence, like handwritten notes, trinkets, pieces of art, kind of woo-woo doctor recommendations, because they thought maybe Amy could get this incredible treatment and they would cure her.
Wow.
But it was remarkable. And it wasn't really until quite a bit later that I was able to process and go through all of those things, because, of course, the tight grip that grief has on you for a long period of time after you lose someone is devastating. And you don't feel like you're ever going to be able to get out of it.
Right.
But once I did, boy, I learned a lot about the human race. Despite what you read in the newspaper and see on TV every day, people are really, really good. And most of them, like I said, wanted to just simply be there for me and the kids and our family.
That's amazing. That's so good to hear. I'm really thrilled to hear that. You said that Amy left really no unfinished business. I mean, you talked about everything, and it's just incredible. I mean, that's an incredible gift that she gave everyone. But even though she did that, you're never really ready for the end.
Right.
Thoughts about that as you went through it? Like, you're preparing for it, you know what's coming, and then it happens.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's really true. And I had time. You're right. We had time together, and we had some incredibly meaningful and intimate conversations that a lot of people don't have the opportunity to do. And we can talk about that later if you'd like. But yeah, I mean, once you have that void and that person who you've shared 8 or 10,000 nights together with, in the bed right next to you, and it's suddenly empty. that's a shocker. And it's really, really, really lonely, even when you do have the tremendous support that I did. I'm very, very lucky in that regard. But yeah, it's sort of, for me, I was so interconnected. There was Amy and Jason. That was one word, and so I had to ultimately find who Jason was again, and that takes a long time.
Sure, sure. So we have a comment. I want to thank Sue Kaliski for putting in a comment. I'm going to read it to you. As a children's librarian and new bubby, Mazel Tov, I've always loved Amy's books and am now so impressed with Paris's works. Is she planning a career as a writer? Great question.
Yeah, it's a great question. And she, here is the incredible nature of this young woman. She's 23 years old, and she already has 2 #1 New York Times best-selling books, one with her mother and one with her father. I don't know that that's ever happened in history, really. And then she just published her first solo book called Dear Baby, and that's we'll see what happens with that. But I know that she does have plans to write a couple of more books, and it's an interesting conversation. I don't know that she's going to do that as a career, but boy, is she gifted, and we'll see where it goes.
Beautiful. Thank you. Talking about writing, so you wrote a eulogy for your wife.
Yes.
Eulogies are hard. And I find a lot of times when members of the family speak, it's among the hardest things they've ever had to do, because you really, in a way, it's the last, unless you write a book, right? It's the last public statement about somebody's life in that setting. Talk about what it was like to put together a eulogy for your wife and then deliver it.
I will talk about myself, but I will also brag for a minute about my children, because, they're all in their 20s, and at this point have had to give 2 eulogies within a very short period of time. I myself gave, 3 eulogies within a 2-year period. That was for Amy, for my dad, and then for my father-in-law. And in particular for Amy, I knew that there would be a huge community outpouring at her celebration of her life, at her memorial service. And I just knew that I wanted to speak some words about her and about us and about our family, and thank the community. And so I really sort of took a page out of Amy's book, so to speak, pardon the pun. And that is to really prepare and over prepare. And I knew how emotional it was going to be. And so I really just worked really hard at it, knowing that I would be overwhelmed with emotion at the moment. And so, the kids were unbelievable, giving their eulogies for their mom. So poised and so funny and so smart. And I was just blown away. And I did my best to hold it together. And I do remember giving it. So I will say that, so a lot of times you sort of forget those moments. You're so into them.
Sure.
But it is not easy. And I would never judge any spouse or anyone who finds it overwhelming to give a eulogy and therefore takes a pass. It's really hard.
No question. No question. Amy's motto was "Make the most of your time here," and her edict was "Your life must go on." And Plan B: be present in your life. Time is short. Talk about, so much wisdom from your wife. So much wisdom. Such important concepts and statements. And how did you make that a part of your marriage? How do you today, beyond Amy, how do you make that part of your day-to-day practice?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. I like how you couple all those things together. Amy lived her life like many of us want to live our lives. And that is, she really appreciated what she called those simple moments that life has to offer. And the analogy I give is that she was obsessed with the play Our Town. And, after she died, I went back and visited that play. And if you recall, there's a character who comes back as her 12-year-old self after she's deceased, and comes back and observes everyday life. And she's literally blown away that people aren't so appreciative of what's going on around them.
Mm.
And I think that's really how Amy naturally lived her life. And so that segues into Plan B. You know,
Mhm.
Plan B, BE, is of course a play on words, which she was so gifted at, because we had this plan that you talked about earlier to fulfill our empty nest goals, and that of course did not work out. And so we had to shift to Plan B, just the letter B, which became Plan BE for me. You know, and so I'm trying still, and I've tried really hard over the last few years to pivot and to see, you know, look inside and see what am I doing with my time on this planet, and trying to make it a little bit more meaningful and to give something. And I hope, you know, events like tonight, where I have the privilege of speaking to you all, um, is part of my Plan B. You know, it is to find my voice, both my speaking voice and my writing voice, to talk about some topics that, as you indicated earlier, people just aren't that comfortable talking about here in North America, and to do many other things, including starting a foundation, which we can talk about if you'd like later.
Absolutely. Naomi Levine brought in a comment. She said that I remember reading the column in the New York Times when it was published. And then she asked, before Amy got sick, had you ever discussed what you would each want for the other? Or did her essay come as a surprise?
Two different questions there, maybe. I think, you know, first of all, no, we didn't really talk about issues that I am now, whenever given the opportunity, encouraging people to talk about. Most of us don't, right? We just assume there's going to be more time, more this, more that. And, you know, I'm here to tell you that please don't do that. You know, we never know what life is going to bring. And I know through your work, you must see a lot of this as well. But so I encourage people to have meaningful conversations when they're younger. Why not? You know, it's such a gift to the person who would be left behind, because there's a lot of questions, and to have many of those answered as opposed to unanswered, and you know, you're constantly thinking about them, really is a devastating process. Grief is hard enough
Right.
for the person that survives. But to have conversations while you're young and healthy about a lot of these meaningful things is really, really important.
Yeah,
And then I think the second part was about the essay, which I think we just covered a minute ago. So
yeah, I do. I really want to underscore what you just said. And again, as a hospice chaplain and working in that realm, a lot of what I do is I try to help people have these conversations because they are so important. Certainly, they're a little bit easier to have when you're healthy. Sometimes people don't want to go there because they're healthy and they don't want to think about that. But they're such important conversations, and especially when there are children, that the decisions not be left to them, but that they're able to fulfill what you want done. I just, again and again, these end of life conversations are fruitful and meaningful and helpful. And I do a lot of encouraging of that. And even when someone is on hospice, I had a situation not that long ago where the family members did not want to tell their loved one that they were on hospice, but they knew intuitively they were on hospice. So I remember the day they cleared the room and had me come in, just me, and said, "Rabbi, I need to talk to you." And they said, "I know I'm on hospice. It's not a secret. Can you help me get my family's head around it? Because I don't want to walk on eggshells anymore. I want to have conversations, and I want to have the chance to say goodbye."
Mm-hmm.
Talk about having that chance to say goodbye. I know you talked a little bit in the book about sudden loss where there's not that opportunity versus slow onset where there really is that opportunity to say goodbye. In particular, you know, we talked about leading up to the end, but the actual moments of saying goodbye. Talk a little bit about that, if you wouldn't mind, Jason.
Sure. You know, right. We were lucky in the sense that we had some time. And so, you know, I found myself in those dark moments, you know, when you're just in your own headspace, maybe in the middle of the night or whatever, thinking about certain topics. And, you know, at the head of that list for me was, we're such a unit, us five Rosenthals. What am I going to do as a single parent to these three children? Yes, they're older. And so I'm not talking about carpool and things like that, which is devastating for a lot of younger people. But for me, it was more like, how am I going to get through the milestones, the new jobs, the potential spouses, weddings, all of these things that I know Amy would just navigate so easily, because that's what she did. She was so good at it, and so we talked a lot about that. And she really looked at me right in the eyes and said, "You're going to be fine. You're a good dad. You got a great relationship with each one of them, and you're going to be okay."
Yeah.
And just that, and we talked further, but just that alone was so important for me. Gave me such a gift and the confidence to eventually, accept that role, which I'm still learning how to do, and the kids are helping me. They're helping me as well. But so there's that, and then there's lots of other things to talk about. There's, if you're in a position to ask your dying spouse or partner or person, whoever it is, do they want to gift a little bit of money somewhere, for example, if you have some money. It's important, even if it's $5, it's important, to talk a little bit about what the service is going to look like. Do you want a service? Do you want people to speak? Who do you want to speak? These are important things to talk about, because why not? It's really a significant moment. Do you want a secular service or a religious service? Do you want music? All of these questions. And then, of course, the big question is, what do you want to do with your body and things like that? So there's a longer list. Amy was fortunate that she didn't have any loose ends to tie up, but I would encourage that too. If you're terminally ill, don't leave those loose ends, untied. So.
I think that's great advice. And I know a lot of the work I do also has to focus on reconciliation. A lot of times relationships, and they're not always reconcilable,
Right.
But where there's an opportunity and where there's a willingness to reconcile, to be able to leave this world in that sense of purity and reconciliation is powerful if it's possible.
Yes.
Let's talk about grief. You had, your wife and your father and your father-in-law and Cougar, the dog, all pass in a very short period of time. Grief compounded on grief, and a lot of grief. What I was struck by in particular, and I'm so glad you said it, and I think you said it so articulately, which is that there is no timeline for grief and all its complexities. There's no straight line. It's a roller coaster.
That's right.
Let's hear a little bit more about that, if you wouldn't mind, Jason.
Yeah, I heard my experience described by a journalist as like a big crash on the interstate, which is true. It's just like boom, boom, boom. But even if you don't have that, even losing one person important to you is going to send you into the depths of grief, if that relationship was meaningful and loving, and that's the only way that grief is going to grip you that tightly, right? That's because you had such a love for the person. And that's correct. There is no timetable. People feel like they should be okay, or maybe they're even told, when are you going to be okay? Which I think is a ridiculous question,
right?
Because
I hear that all the time.
Yes, I'm sure you do. I mean, the point about being no timetable is you feel like, okay, this is lifting a little bit. I am going to step out of the house. I'm maybe going to go to dinner with a friend. I maybe go to a concert or whatever I'm going to do, take baby steps on your path forward. And then you see something randomly that reminds you of the person. And literally it could be randomly, like just blindsides you. And so of course that's going to set you back a little bit, and so I think that's how it happens. A few steps forward, a couple back, and that process could go on for quite a long time. And that cycle of anxiety is normal. And I don't think enough people really hear that and understand that that's probably what's going to happen. Yeah,
no, I think that's well said. And grief is individual for everyone, and the amount of time somebody's in the valley, and comes out and then goes back in, it's individual, and every loss is unique. And like you said, right, the depth of love reflects often the intensity of the grief. And I mean, that's just so true. That's so true.
Yeah.
So what are some of the less than helpful things people said to you after Amy died, trying to cheer you up, trying to make you feel better? I know that I hear every day going into Shiva homes and at funerals, people say things, again, well-meaning, trying to find those, again, magical words, right? Magical words when somebody's ill, magical words when somebody dies, to make you feel better and to instantly heal you, recognizing if we step back from it, there's no such thing and those words don't exist. But do you recall any of the well-meaning but silly, hurtful, ridiculous things that people said?
Well, I think you and I talked about this the other day, and that is, I was at a wedding, and I found myself parked next to a widow, not ironically, I'm sure, and she knew my situation, and she began to describe her journey and said something to the effect of, oh, it's 17 years later, and I still haven't, haven't found anybody or dated. That was not very helpful at the time. That did not feel too good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there were some comments like that, but I have to be honest with you. In my own situation, my personal experience is that you feel people may be judging you for this or for that, and to focus on your inner circle and the people that are important to you. And I would gamble that almost every single one of those people, probably all of them, just want you to be happy in your new life and in your new situation. So whether it's dating too early or, whatever it is, going out and maybe having some fun and you feel judged.
Yeah.
I would encourage you to not feel that way, even though it's hard, because like I said, people want you to be happy, and however long that takes is however long it takes. Yeah.
Sure. I do think people have the right intention. I mean, things when I hear people say they're in a better place, I mean, I cringe because as I mentioned to you before, if it's the individual feels that way who suffered the loss, that's one thing. But to invoke that theology on someone else is hard. And, when they say, well, at least you had them for 80 years, my feeling is, well, I wanted them for 90 years or 95 years, which is in our book, Never Long Enough, that I did with Dr. Michelle Sider. The point is that it's never long enough. When you lose somebody, you lose your heart in a way, and it hurts.
No, I think that's a really good point, and I love the title of your book. It's really, really true. Yeah.
So let's talk about your essay. So this incredible essay that Amy writes and published on March 3rd of 2017, and then on Father's Day of 2018, in the same place, the Modern Love section of the New York Times, your essay comes out. My wife said, "You may want to marry me," title of your book. How long did it take you to pen that, and how long did you think about it before it sort of went from your head to reality, or to the pen, or however the computer, however you did it initially?
Yeah. Good question. The first piece of writing that I did was at the end of the same year that Amy died, and that's when I wrote my what became my TED Talk. So I was able to formulate something that I really wanted to share with the universe. And then when I was asked to do the Modern Love column, it was a little less intimidating, even though I'm not necessarily. I shouldn't say that. I am now an author and a writer, but at the time, it was not the most familiar territory for me. So it took me quite a while, and I worked with the editor of the Modern Love column, who's wonderful. And the words, to be honest with you, came to me fairly easily, because it's easy to talk about, our life and the message I wanted to convey.
Beautiful.
And then, it was from that I was given an opportunity to expand it into this book form.
So as a #1 New York Times bestselling author, how long did that take to happen?
The book that you're referring to actually was the book I wrote with Paris, my daughter.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long did that take to go to #1?
Oh, I mean, we were lucky. I think what happens with the nature of children's books is that it gets a lot of attention right away if you're lucky. And so that happened to us sort of right out of the gate, which was quite amazing.
Mm, that's
Yeah.
wonderful. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So, talk a little bit about the foundation and your involvement with it and what it does and what sort of influenced you to set it up.
Yeah, I think that it's a part of the book I write about, which is the third section of loosely that I would call resilience. And I think some of us who've been to the depths of grief are surprised that from that you find this resilience that was so unexpected. And after Amy died, I just knew there were a few things that I wanted to do, and one of them was to start a foundation in her honor and bearing her name.
Mm.
And so that's what I did. I didn't know what I was doing. I don't have any experience being a board chair of a nonprofit organization, but I put together a list of my wildest dreams who I would like to have on the board and extended invitations and put together a fabulous board of directors. And we began to meet and to, do what we had set out to do. So the mission is twofold. One is to raise awareness and engage research in the area of early detection of ovarian cancer,
Mm-hmm.
because the statistics show that most often it's late stage. And unfortunately, at that point, the 5-year survival rate is somewhere between 10 and 20%.
Okay.
Whereas an early detection of the disease literally flips those statistics on its head. So we're trying. We've got a couple grants out, and we're engaging a researcher now. And the other part of the mission is what Amy devoted most of her adult life to, which is children's literature.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've been really lucky to donate tens of thousands of books to kids in need all over the country, and we're continuing to do that. We pivoted to the virtual space for our second fundraiser, which was just this past October. And if you go to Amy Krauss Rosenthal Foundation.org, there's a video there of the program that is really fabulous. Some like A-list stars have helped us, and it's been really, really rewarding work.
That's amazing. Wow. Congratulations. I mean, you've taken something so personal and turned it into something to help so many people. And I mean, that's incredible. Incredible.
Thank you.
So I have a few more questions, but again, I want to encourage if there's any questions out there. I don't want to monopolize, but Rabbi is never short on questions. So please, if anybody has additional questions, please put them into the comment section and I'll ask them. But if there aren't any other ones, or until there are other ones, let me ask you this. Is there anything you wish, Jason, that you would have done differently? And is there anything you wish you hadn't done? And I look at sort of the entire trajectory of really actually from the beginning of your marriage to Amy's illness and death to now. Is there anything with the knowledge that you've gained and the support that you've gotten, is there anything you would have, the advice that you would give others that you wish you would have done it differently or wish you hadn't done it?
It's a really big question. I've given that some thought, but I, through the process of Amy's illness, there's really nothing that I did that I have any regrets about or would have done differently. I forgot about everything else just because that was my instinct, and so that was my number one focus for almost 2 years. And so I don't really have any regrets about that. My advice, though, in that regard, if you're asking me, is to think about the fact that there may be a limited amount of time. And so if you have to take a leave of absence from work or, devote yourself to your person, please do that, because you may run out of time. I think that the biggest thing perhaps is my regret about the whole trajectory of my life, since you're asking, and I do spend some time in the book about this, is, did I spend 3 decades as a lawyer? Was that the most useful time for me, to give back in the way that I wanted to? And don't get me wrong, lawyering was really, really good to me. And I enjoyed moments of it, but I don't know that it was exactly in keeping with my personality type. So I perhaps perhaps there's a little regret there, but it's not too late. We'll see what the next part of my life looks like.
When you go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, and I think maybe just like I'm so hyper focused now on appreciating Amy's viewpoint of the world. Maybe I could have dipped into her world a little bit more, but it's not really a regret. I don't regret it, but maybe revise it a little bit.
Interesting. Let me ask this. What part of Amy, or what part of your relationship with Amy, do you miss the most?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I think lately, we, as in any division of labor and any, partnership, we're really good at working with each child, and these are now young adults, but just having those quiet moments where you can talk about, did I say the right thing, or am I doing the right thing, or maybe you should say this thing because you're better at it, those types of things. I think that's the biggest thing that I miss.
Okay.
Co-parenting,
I know this question is probably on people's minds, so I'm going to ask it. And that is, so with the essay of "You may want to marry my husband." So talk about, are you in a relationship? Are you seeking a relationship? I am sure you are getting nonstop, well, you talked a little bit about it, nonstop, either not necessarily marriage proposals, but people that would like to maybe meet you and see where it goes. How do you sort of, where are you?
I did get a lot of that, and at the time, to be honest with you, once I started to read those, they were great. Most of the women who reached out to me were really sincere and wrote me beautiful, beautiful things. Some were funny and caused me to have a much needed laugh at the time, but yeah, no, the answer is I'm in a beautiful and meaningful relationship, and I feel very, very lucky. And I write a little bit about, in the last part of the book, about what it's like to date after being out of the game for 3 decades. It's a really complicated process for anyone who has to get through it. And so I wanted to relay a little bit of my personal anxiety and my experience in dipping my toes into that water after so long.
Sure.
So yeah, I share a little bit of that in the book too.
Yeah. Diane asked a question. She wants to know, do you think it's appropriate to ask those in grief if they like copies of photos you have of the person who died, or to bring them with you when you first see them?
Well, that's such a great question. It's so funny you asked that, because literally, I think it was, I can't remember if it was this morning or last night. I had a acquaintance that I know, who spent some time with Amy in this writing program, sent me a photo of her, and my kids were there because they were home for the holidays, and it was just really nice to see. It was great, and so I would say absolutely 100% yes, share those for sure.
Beautiful. Carol Weintraub-Fogel says that the book was heartwarming and inspiring. The talk speaks to all of us about how to live our lives. And Debbie Landau thanks us for a wonderful heartwarming presentation, or in particular you. This is not about me, this is about you. I do want to make sure everybody knows that the book, again, is available, as Sandy said at the beginning. My wife said, "You may want to marry me," a memoir. It's available for sale on the JCC website. I highly, highly recommend everybody getting a copy. I think it is just so thoughtful and so powerful. So I'm going to end with this last question, unless there are any other questions from the crowd. Tell us about where you go from here, next projects, next sort of thoughts in terms of moving forward.
Yeah, at the end of Amy's essay, she left me a literal blank space, which I've used as a metaphor to continue on in my life. And the blank space was, of course, to find another love story. But like I said, I've used it in other facets of my life. And to be honest with you, I'm still figuring that out. I've been really enjoying writing. For the last 3 years before the world was shut down, I did a lot of public speaking all over the world, which has been super meaningful to travel around and meet people and share stories. I'm so sorry I can't be there with you all in person today. And so I am continuing to do some writing and thinking about maybe further education and more writing. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Well,
Yeah.
Jason, this was
Stay
really
tuned.
an honor. Thank you for sharing your heart with us. Thank you for giving us such incredible wisdom. Thank you for sharing Amy with us. I really can't recommend more highly your book. And in the chat or in the comments, you can click on the website and go right to it and get it to come right to your house. So I wish you all good in the future. And I wish everyone health and safety and all the best.
Thank you all so much. And thank you for these wonderful questions. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jason and Rabbi Krakoff, for being with us and for such an inspiring and beautiful and emotional conversation. And thank you to all of you at home for joining us. Our next event is this evening at 7 p.m. when we welcome Michael Ian Black, author of A Better Man, and Meredith Jacobs, author of Just Between Us, who will discuss how to raise better men. Remember to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and again, visit our website, culturalarts.jccdet.org/bookfair for our full schedule and ways to get involved. Have a great night, and thanks for tuning in.